Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel on food insecurity. The pandemic has demonstrated the great needs of huge numbers of New Jersey families, particularly related to food insecurity. Many people who used to donate to food banks and volunteer in pantries find themselves needing to seek this assistance for their own families. Panelists will share their experiences and lessons learned about food, the resilience of the food banks and commercial food industry, the role of NJVOAD in identifying needs and coordinating the response, how government is assisting, and how special cultural groups are lending a hand to fill the gaps. I'm going to introduce our four panelists now and give you a little bit of background on them, and then we'll ask them to talk about the mission of their organizations. I'm first delighted to introduce Connor Schmiegel, Associate Director of Public Affairs at the New Jersey Food Council. The Food Council represents supermarkets, convenience stores, and the food distribution industry in the Garden State and represents some of its largest employers. With a $136 billion economy feeding almost 9 million New Jerseyans. Connor joined the Food Council in December 2019, about 2 to 3 months before all of this happened. He had worked on congressional and gubernatorial campaigns and served as the research assistant at the Rowena Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship. In our early discussions with Linda Doherty, President and CEO of the Food Council, about the pandemic, I was moved by the passion she expressed about the dedication and risks faced by the food workers on whom we have all depended throughout this difficult year. Linda could not be with us today, but she asked Connor to join us. The next person that I'd like to introduce to you is Denise Daniels, who is Director of Outreach and Volunteer Services at the United Way of Greater Mercer County. She previously served as Community Affairs Manager of Comcast and coordinated their Comcast Cares Days. She's also a councilwoman in East Windsor. Linda Rivera and I got to know Denise through her major food collection drives in Mercer County, and it will be great to learn how these events have evolved during the pandemic. Joan Healy has placed a key role in bringing many of us together to identify how we can work in partnership to address food insecurity. She is the New Jersey SNAP Ed Senior Program Coordination Supervisor for Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County. Joan has been a participant in the weekly and bi-weekly NJVOAD calls and used this communication to identify ways that we can work together. She brought a number of us to the table, the Zoom table, to discuss how to bring volunteerism and AmeriCorps together with food programs in Mercer County that needed human resources. Joan, we know you will have much to share with us today. And finally, I'd like to introduce Zenon Christodoulou, who is one of New Jersey's cultural leaders, serving as chairman of the New Jersey Hellenic-American Heritage Commission, which is part of the New Jersey Department of State, as well as wide-ranging academic, philanthropic, and community affairs. It's been an honor for me to work with Zenon and to learn of the great ancient and contemporary contributions of Hellenic culture. Zenon has partnered with the Office of Homeland Security on a number of issues and became active with NJVOAD on food security. He identified and was our Hellenic matchmaker with dairies outside of New Jersey who were willing to donate huge quantities of yogurt and other dairy products to New Jersey's food banks and pantries. We're so grateful, Zenon, and look forward to hearing about this joint venture. So now I'm going to ask each of you to talk to us a little bit about the mission of your organization and how it's responded to the pandemic this year, and how food insecurity has evolved for you over these 12 months. So I'm going to ask Connor to get us started.
Thank you, Rowena, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Although Linda couldn't be here today, I'm honored to be here to just share some of the insights of the New Jersey Food Council during this pandemic. So first and foremost, as you said, we're an alliance of food retailers and their supplier partners. So essentially, we represent your local food stores and the companies that supply those stores. So we are everywhere throughout the state of New Jersey. So that's your local Wegmans, your ShopRite, your Stop and Shop, Wawa, Quick Check, Acme, and their supplier partners such as Goya Foods, Campbell Soup Company, Mission Foods, and even Coke and Pepsi. So we're the backbone of every town and community that keeps the neighborhoods fed throughout the state of New Jersey. Here at the Food Council, it's always been our mission to strengthen the existing relationship that our members have with their food bank partners and service groups. That's why here at the Food Council, we have an honorary membership for all of our food bank partners and service groups to help keep that network between our members and food bank partners strong, especially during a time of crisis. And our members are no stranger to a time of crisis. I think back to 2012 when Hurricane Sandy hit our coastline. Our members stepped up as they always do and made sure that all the families that were affected by that storm, that they were fed. And even if the stores were shut down in that community, other stores from other communities brought truckloads of food to make sure they were fed. Now, this time around during the pandemic, the major difference from that crisis was that this crisis affected the entire state of New Jersey. It affected the entire world. So the food supply was spread very, very thin. And our members who always donated food contributions to their food bank partners and service groups, they needed to focus on replenishing that food supply in their stores so all families could be fed. But our members still wanted to be sure that they were helping their food bank partners. And so in order to do that, even though they couldn't give directly with food, they gave monetary contributions. And just examples throughout the pandemic, early on, a year ago, actually, it's crazy to think that it's been a year, Wakefern Food Corporation, right off the bat, when the pandemic really touched down in the state of New Jersey, they donated $1 million to our regional food bank partners. They went even further than that, and they created a creative campaign called the Essential Thanks Campaign, encouraging customers just to spread a message of thanks either online or in their stores. And for each thank you that Wakefern received, they would donate $1, and they raised up to $500,000. That was $1.5 million directly to their food bank partners. Similarly, Wise Markets, they began their annual Fight Hunger campaign earlier than they usually do, which encouraged customers that if they were so fortunate upon checkout to donate $1 or $3 or whatever you can to help the food bank partners. And they raised more than $1.6 million for food banks. Unilever, one of our supplier groups, they had a United for America pledge where they donated 1 day's worth of pork products, as well as they pledged $20 million to their food bank partners. On March 20th, really right on and early in the pandemic, the Wawa Foundation donated over $400,000 to more than 273 organizations across its entire operating area. Zally Somerset ShopRites, they donated $50,000 and an additional $25,000 to the Food Bank of South Jersey so they could expand their storage and freezer capacities. Later on, when the supply was strong, the food supply, Zally, that same ShopRite, donated 2 trucks worth of food to that same food bank. And so when the food supply finally was replenished and strong again, and customers were shopping normally, our members returned to their usual food donations. Food Circus donated more than 650 to 700 dinners, lunch break of Red Bank. Bergenfield's Lidl donated more than $1,500 worth of groceries. And Sarah Supermarkets thought about the senior community. You know, seniors were a very vulnerable population during this pandemic, and they couldn't go directly to grocery stores. So in Sarah Supermarkets, instead, they brought toilet paper, paper towels, produce, and necessities to these senior living facilities. And Quick Check, they decided to volunteer directly at the Community Food Bank of New Jersey and packaged over 700 emergency food boxes. So over and over, our members, even if the food supply was thin, that was no excuse to them. throughout every crisis, they're going to make sure that they're helping their food bank partners. And they did that through monetary support. And then when the food supply was strengthened, they went back to food donations as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connor. I'm now going to ask Denise to chime in about the mission of the United Way.
Thank you so much, Rowena, and thank you, Connor. It's amazing to hear what our food partners on the other side were doing as well during this crisis. It really brings home how we have all been working together to make sure that everyone in New Jersey is fed. The mission of United Way is we connect individuals and families with resources because we want them to reach their fullest potential, because in turn that will make us all have a thriving, healthy community. So we have invested in programs, community partnerships, and of course, we couldn't do any of this without our volunteers. So during the pandemic, this really put a spotlight on the gaps that were in this community that needed to be filled to really help support the entire community. There are people living in our community that we refer to as ALICE families. And ALICE is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So these are folks that do have jobs, but they're just barely making it and scraping by. So when something like a pandemic or a crisis hits, whether it's the pandemic we've just been through or Hurricane Sandy, which Connor had mentioned before, they are the most vulnerable and the most likely not to be able to manage without some support from the community. So we've galvanized our community to make sure that we would reach out to all of our corporations, our nonprofits, government agencies. United Way went for more grants. We received donations. And of course, our volunteers stepped up, who we needed to really help us make sure that we could feed the community. More and more people were experiencing what is known as food insecurity. And food insecurity is if you're not sure where your next meal is coming from. And that really exploded exponentially during this crisis because so many more people had lost their jobs. People were home. They really were at a loss of how they were going to move forward. So for United Way, we really had to rethink what we were doing and how we were going to engage the community, because also safety and the best delivery system were two critical aspects that we needed to consider when seeing how we could go forth. And as I'll discuss later with our details about our Strike Out Hunger event, which typically happens every year in the summer, we were forced to cancel that because of the pandemic, but we knew we still needed to meet the needs of the community, in fact, more so. So we had to pivot and figure out how we were going to make that happen. Rowena, I'll turn it back to you, and we can hear from everyone else on how they were also managing during this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. And now we're going to turn to Joan Healy, who played a very pivotal role in bringing some of us together. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Rowena. And I'm so inspired by what Connor had to say. So grateful to Denise. In fact, this seems to be all about networking. It was, in fact, United Way that actually informed us about the New Jersey VOAD. So, thank you so much, Denise. Anyway, I'm from Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County, the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences, and as Rowena said, SNAP Ed. Most of you know that SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or formerly food stamps, and we are the nutrition education arm of the SNAP program. So what we do primarily are two things. One, we provide ways to empower limited resource populations to eat healthy on a budget, and we try to make changes in the community that are sustainable to help with healthy food access. So we were able to pivot all of our nutrition and cooking education classes to an online format and work with our partners who serve our audience to Zoom into people's homes, to get cooking going in the kitchen. And it's really been a phenomenal experience. We also extended our social media outreach as another way to get to people electronically, creating video libraries of healthy foods and simple recipes that were budget friendly. But for purposes of this panel, my main focus is on the area of improving healthy food access. So I was asked to co-facilitate a food-focused coalition in Mercer County, along with the Trenton Health team. And that group was called the Trenton Food Stakeholders. Formerly, this group had met quarterly, and we're trying to address food insecurity and food access issues. But when the pandemic hit, we saw the need to meet more frequently and expand our partners. So we started meeting bi-weekly, and our listserv increased. Our partner groups partnered to over 100 people. These included the Mercer Street Friends Food Bank, the member pantries, faith-based organizations, farmers, nonprofits, commercial groups, you name it, the school district. We brought everyone in. We were obviously focused on this growing food insecurity need. The food banks and food pantries reported that the need had tripled during the pandemic. So we were trying to be that central group that would try to coordinate meeting needs, preparing for summer meal programs, and identifying any gaps, creating an interactive map so that individuals could access the locations where food was being provided over their smartphones with a QR code. But it was through the New Jersey VOAD, the local Mercer COAD, and the feeding and food distribution work group of the VOAD that was really my lifeline to creating partner connections that really moved our work farther, faster, and allowed us to do things that we would otherwise not have done. And so as we continue this discussion, I'll detail more about that. My grateful thanks to all, especially Rowena, and I'll turn it back to you now.
Hi again, everyone. And now Zenon Christodoulou is going to give us some background on the contributions that he made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rowena, and thank you everyone for joining us today. You know, food is one of those most basic of human needs. And unfortunately, there are those periods in history where not everyone can get what they need to survive. And it's that basic. It's a matter of survival. And this pandemic really has shed the light on some of those issues more than any time we can remember. The Greek-American community in New Jersey and across the country has played an active role for generations in helping provide food to needy people. Whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a tornado, a snow event, or something like a pandemic, the Greek community has stepped up in many ways to provide resources, financial or food resources, to people who are in need. Now that tradition goes back literally thousands of years, back to Homeric times, when they talked about philoxenia, the love of strangers, and particularly those in desperate need. That tradition and that legacy continues to the present day. As a matter of fact, just recently, I guess not too recently, but after World War II, Oxfam, which we know is one of the global leaders and one of the first relief agencies to provide food globally, was delivered to Greece. It was intended to actually supply food to the people who were starving after World War II. And that memory is still alive in many of us. And we understand how important it is to make sure that people have the necessary food they need in their daily lives. So that has given, in many ways, the Greek community in New Jersey, as many of us know, an opportunity to provide this in the hospitality industry and in form of restaurants and commercial food industry that we're in many ways so well known for. And in whatever crisis, whether it's a specific catastrophe, which we've had many of, or this ongoing tragedy that we're experiencing now, the Greek American community and the food industry in particular has always stepped up to provide the necessary resources. One example we just had recently was in December, when a friend of mine who owns a rather large dairy, and the largest dairy in Greece, and they have a presence here in the United States, told me that they had a substantial amount of yogurt that they would be willing to donate. Well, I didn't know how to do that. So of course I called Rowena Madden, who is the knower of all things. And I said, hey, Ro, we have an opportunity here. There was somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 or 90,000 containers of low-fat, high-protein yogurt that we're able to deliver. What do we do? Well, in that case, NJVOAD and Rutgers and the food banks really came together in such a quick fashion to find out how we can get this delivered to the food banks and then distributed to needy families. It was an incredible experience, and it shed light on the fact that the infrastructure actually exists. There is a mechanism to deliver resources to people who are in need. But the problem is sometimes people don't know about it, whether it's on the supply side, when many people in the food industry might not understand that there are opportunities to help and there are mechanisms that we could put in place. And a lot of times consumers don't know that there are great resources available to them. So it's a very important opportunity for us to learn from, not just understanding and appreciating things that have helped needy people recently, but also how we can make an improvement in the future and how we can make sure that this mechanism is expanded and that people learn more about it. And that, I think, is one of the key things that we need to keep in mind. This current situation we're in is not likely to abate anytime soon. And there may be other things that follow it. But if we can learn the essential nature of what makes a society strong and united, and that is first and foremost providing food resources, healthy, nutritional food resources, so people can go on with their daily lives and literally, and sometimes it's a matter of survival. So I was very happy to play even a tiny part in connecting some pieces in this large, confusing puzzle. I want to thank everyone on this panel for all you do, and I hope we can continue to do more. Rowena, thank you very much, and we look forward to future endeavors and collaborations.
Hi again, everyone. I think I'm going to ask individual questions that I've been thinking about. So first, Connor, I remember that in one of the early discussions with Linda Doherty, she talked about the nimbleness of the food industry in New Jersey in responding to this unprecedented event. Can you tell us some of the changes that they had to address so nimbly?
Yeah, Rowena, I'm glad you asked that question. Even though I myself was here 3 months prior to the pandemic hit, I myself am a customer just like everyone else. And as we all experienced and witnessed, the changes our members experienced happened overnight. You had shopping patterns that for years have been traditional and never changed to ways where half your face is covered. You're wearing a mask. There were capacity limits. There were lines outside the doors when people were panic buying, stockpiling, and the food supply was tested more than it's ever has been. However, our members, they kept their cool. And they knew that in time of crisis, it's always important to band together. And here at the New Jersey Food Council, we were always able to provide an environment for our members so that way they could come and meet together and put their competition aside to make sure that they were keeping their doors open day in and day out, so that way families across New Jersey stayed fed. And it's through groups such as, the governor's office, NJVOAD, that we were able to, express some of our concerns or restrictions to, our government partners. That way, some of the restrictions such as, let's say, trucks would go into town after a certain time, after midnight, we could get waivers for our delivery drivers. So that way the food supply could be replenished. And when our members couldn't volunteer directly or deliver certain things to, food banks, it was volunteer groups that they have existing relationships with that came through and were able to pick up those donations. So, the nimbleness and the nature of this pandemic was absolutely unprecedented. But I mean, I'm proud of everything that our members did just to make sure that, you know, they didn't worry about their bottom dollar. They were worrying about making sure that every family still had access to healthy and good food across the Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor. Denise, traditionally, you have held those large-scale food collection and distribution events. Has that changed, or how has that changed?
Thanks, Rowena. Certainly it has changed. Actually, one of the ways I think we met, Rowena, was at one of those events. You and Linda joined us, and we're quite amazed. We had about 600 people at the year you came, which is about now 6-7 years old that we've been doing this event, which really started out for us as a corporate engagement team building type event called our Strikeout Hunger. And it's a food packing event. But of course, 2020 changed things. And now it became more of a call to action for our corporate partners and the community, because typically not having the ability to have 400 to 600 people creating meals was really going to put a damper on what we were going to be able to provide the community in 2020. In 2019, we packed 75,000 servings of chicken vegetable soup, which we provided to Mercer Street Friends. And one of the things that Joan had mentioned is how we all do work together. And this was one way that we could, as United Way, help the community on a broad scale. And we do this every summer to fill a gap that exists when children lose access to their free breakfast and free lunch programs at school. Obviously, we know they lost their access because of the pandemic. So how were we going to make sure that this was going to be a way we could get folks, especially our Alice families, some food over this course of this time, and also not knowing how long this was going to last. So what we did with our grant money that we received, we did purchase some food. We collaborated with Rolling Harvest, which I know Joan also mentioned about healthy food, and Zenon mentioned about healthy food and how important that is as well. And Rolling Harvest is a conglomerate of local farmers who donate their produce. So we've been working with Rolling Harvest for the past several years as part of our strategy of Strikeout Hunger. And we really looked to them even more this past year to make sure that not only were shelf-stable food being available to our families, but as well as the fresh produce, the most important piece. So we created these drive-up drop-off and drive-up distribution locations. It became our strategy to make sure that our volunteers were going to stay healthy and safe. We placed boxes of food donation boxes at various locations. One of our partners, Starbucks in Mercer County, places that were still open. Some of our bank partners who had their lobbies still open. We had young people in the community going door to door and to their neighbors and their friends, collecting food. Some of our corporations that were still having some interaction with their employees, and even when they didn't, they would come to our drop-off locations and drop off food. So we collected in a very short time in June over 5,000 pounds of food. And this helped, all went to our Mercer Street Friends partner and really helped the community, as well as we had our volunteers who were at all of our locations helping distribute the food out. So 2021 is going to be a little bit different. We still have a lot of our volunteers who are a little bit reticent about coming out. We're going to be doing our distribution in parking lots again in 2021. And as well as we are going to try to have a real live event this year. Typically, we do this at TCNJ. And we were inside. This year, we're going to be outside in the parking lot with a much smaller group of folks and using all the protocols, obviously, in place, the safety in place to make sure everybody is safe. But we are looking forward to be able to do that, as well as making this an entire summer event. We aren't anticipating that this need is going to go away anytime soon. So we'll be working with a lot of our partners with the VOAD, the COAD, with Mercer Street Friends, and all of the other people in the community who are willing to help us make sure that Strike Out Hunger will continue in some form and probably be even more important this year than it's ever been in the past. So we are looking forward to that. Thank you, Rowena, for the opportunity to explain a little bit about what our Strike Out Hunger is all about.
Thank you so much, Denise. I'm going to ask Joan. Joan, you mentioned that you had some more detail to provide regarding the relationship with NJVOAD and the COAD. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how that works.
Thank you, Rowena. In the true spirit of the VOAD, the key words that I've seen are communication, coordination, collaboration, cooperation. These have borne out so strongly through this process. Through the work and connections with the VOAD and the COAD and the feeding and food distribution work group, there are four main areas where the VOAD really helped crystallize some very strong efforts. First was related to food. Zenon already spoke about the Delta Dairy donation. The part that was so critical with the VOAD, who knew there was a group called the American Logistics Aid Network? I certainly did not. What I found is that this group provides during disasters free services of transportation and storage. We all saw the dumping of milk and other things that broke our hearts during the pandemic. Who knew that Allen, as they are called for short, was the key link to getting that yogurt from Maryland to Rolling Harvest, who gave it out at a Cure Arena event where they served over 1,000 families. And the remainder went to the Community Food Bank of New Jersey and went out to several of their counties. That was critical. Also, I had contacted the New Jersey Food Council and asked, and it was immediately right when the pandemic started, about any donations for Mercer County. Lo and behold, it was at the time where there was short supply in the food industry. But a week later, Linda got back to me, Linda from the New Jersey Food Council, and said PepsiCo had contacted someone that she knew. She connected me with that person. We got that donation over to Mercer Street Friends. So those are two food examples. Second, food resources. A lot of information had to be shared during this time. And through that food distribution and feeding work group that met every other week, we were informed about numerous USDA updates through members on the group, and particularly Hunger Free New Jersey. We learned about the SNAP benefit increases. We learned about the ability of SNAP recipients to be able to purchase groceries online. Think about it. The elder population, the homebound population, the most vulnerable population, we were able to get that communication out to our groups through our Trenton Food Stakeholder Network. We were also able to work with the many and numerous waivers that the USDA provided amazingly. When children were not in school, how are they going to get their food? So we were able to get that information and pass it through to all of our member agencies, including doing so for summer meal site sign up. So those food resources, that information was vital for us. If not for the work of the VOAD, I'm not sure that we would have gotten that information, or if so, would have gotten it as quickly. Third, volunteers. Well, the New Jersey Help Now New Jersey volunteer portal, which is also on the New Jersey VOAD site, that was a lifeline for me to provide a linkage to our food distributors so that they could request volunteers. And when Keith Adams said at the beginning of this year, when a lot of the volunteers were going back to work and there was a greater need, that there was a real uptick, a surge of volunteers, I was able to inform our member agencies that there were about 119 volunteers in Mercer County and the 2 bordering counties. This provided another opportunity for our groups to seek volunteers. Also, through the VOAD and speaking with Rowena, we learned about a COVID Service Corps, an AmeriCorps program that Montclair State had applied for and received funding for 56 volunteers. So I had a call with Rowena. She connected us with Montclair State University, and we were able to connect the 3 food distributors who really needed volunteers with that program. There was some delay in college students signing up, these college students from Rutgers, TCNJ, and Montclair State, but they are in contact. One has received a volunteer, and they are looking forward to that program growing and hopefully receiving more volunteers. And then finally was PPE. Is there any acronym we've heard more during the pandemic? Who would have known that FEMA would be available to provide that PPE to our food distributors who so needed them? They were on the front lines. Again, it was through attending the New Jersey VOAD calls that I became aware of this opportunity. I worked very closely with our Mercer COAD in order to get those that PPE distributed. And it was just, it was wonderful for all of the groups involved. So that's why I'm saying I cannot say enough about the New Jersey VOAD, the groups, the networking, the support that has been provided. What a model it is for the future. We talk about these silver linings. What a silver lining. We can go forward with these partnerships, this cooperation, collaboration, coordination, and communication, and we can move farther, faster in the future. And as Keith Adams always concludes his calls with, he tells us to be safe and to be kind. And I think there's so much to be said about those words, that acknowledgement that in all we do, we not only do it, we do it with passion and we do it to serve others, but we do it in kindness. And I think it's such a model for our world in these days, for the COAD and the VOAD to recognize that. So thank you so much, Rowena, and thank you to the VOAD for all that you have done.
Joan, thank you. That was a beautiful, you brought it all together beautifully, and we will tell Keith Adams he needs to watch this panel. But I'm going to just switch this for a moment to Zenon. Zenon, is the word pandemic Greek?
Of course.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's one of the ones we get to coin that doesn't bring good things to mind.
Yes, I was thinking about that. And did you want to talk a little bit about how other cultural or faith-based groups can perhaps step up a little bit more to help?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ro, for asking, because I think that each community has a big role to play. And first and foremost, it's a matter of communicating. It's an understanding and learning all of the resources that are available for different organizations and different community groups, and then implementing some of these plans on more local levels to engage people. I have found that people were incredibly happy to be able to help and to assist in this terrible time. And if we can plan on bringing more people together, educating different organizations, different industry groups, particularly around food and the food industry, whether it's from manufacture, distribution, or even in restaurants that we need to talk about as well. I think there's a great opportunity to limit the damage of what's going on and what may happen in the future, in future pandemics. Just as an example of communication, I found in the last few months that we had the opportunity to deliver 40,000 containers of high protein shakes that were ultra pasteurized, meaning they didn't require refrigeration for long periods of time, and they had a shelf life of 4 months. It was up in Buffalo, so I contacted some people I knew up in Buffalo, and it was picked up and delivered to food banks and to 40,000 needy people who could use that, put it in their house and use it as a great nutritional supplement. And it was all because of communication and the knowledge that I learned in a short time that the resources were there, that the infrastructure actually existed, and that we could do some good things to help a lot of people. You know, in a natural catastrophe of the types of Superstorm Sandy or Irma or Harvey or any of these things, the supply trains stopped, they ceased. We couldn't get things in. This was a different issue this time. And this required different learning, which I'm amazed how quickly and how nimble, quite frankly, we talked about earlier, how nimble NJVOAD and so many other organizations were in the governor's office and in the state, because it wasn't really so much about getting trucks through. It was how do we get it to that last mile? And we've heard about the last mile in a lot of industries these days, but that last mile became a really critical and most important element that was that needed solving, and I think that it was done in a very exemplary fashion. So I think from my experience that it's communication, it's bringing people on board now and engaging them in the long-term discussion of what we can do now and, God forbid, in the next catastrophe or pandemic. And just for you, Rowena, as I finish up here, pandemic comes from pan, meaning everything, right, inclusive, and demic from demos, meaning people, so it affects all the people. So that's where pandemic comes from.
Thank you so much, Zenon. I'm going to sort of wind us down a little bit now and ask if any of you would like to talk about what you foresee as the challenges of the next 12 months, or if you would like to mention some heroes that you encountered along the way. You can respond to both, but Connor, is there any particular challenges that you're planning for the next 12 months or any heroes that you want to mention?
Yeah, so the challenge for us will remain the same, just with the fact that we're going to continue the momentum with our donations and the volunteer networks that are in place, they work, and the existing relationships that our members have with their food bank partners, they're effective, but they need volunteers. So it's important. There are safety protocols out there that people can volunteer. And now that vaccinations are coming throughout the state, we're hoping that more and more people can volunteer. So that way our members who are focused on restocking their shelves, if they can't volunteer, people in these networks can for them. And just a hero that I would like to mention, Jeff Brown, who's the CEO of Brown Superstores. He experienced a problem unlike some of our other members, because not only was he facing the challenges of the pandemic, but his two stores in the city of Philadelphia. And over the summer, national events took place and riots broke out in the city, and massive damage was taken upon his two stores and small businesses across the city. But Jeff, the next day, made it his priority to get those stores back up and running as soon as possible, because that community was affected, just as bad as, they were depicted on the news. You saw businesses and homes destroyed, and access to food was threatened even more so than what it already was during the pandemic. And because of him, his stores were able to be back online and those families had access to food. But not only that, Jeff Brown took it upon himself and the other members of the board of the PA 30-day fund, where he sits with other business leaders and they donate funds for forgivable loans to small businesses in the community. And they raised over $100,000 and they donated, funds of $1,000 to $3,000 to small businesses to get them back up and running again. And just the selfless nature of Jeff and his store and the other businesses that were involved in this fund. I mean, to me, it's just amazing what they're able to do. And keep a close eye on Jeff. He could potentially be the next mayor of Philadelphia. And just on a personal note, another hero. She'd probably tell me, oh, you shouldn't have. But my boss, Linda Doherty, she's a personal hero of mine, because during the food industry's hardest and darkest days, she always knew to take a deep breath, strategize, and she knew that life will find a way. She always knew and trusted in our members who are resilient and work day in and day out to get food to families across the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Connor. And yes, give our regards to Linda. Denise, how's the next 12 months look to you, and any heroes that you would like to cite?
Well, thanks, Rowena. I think the biggest challenge and the biggest unknown still is this pandemic. When will everybody be, free to roam about and feel more comfortable to be out in groups? Many of our companies, as I mentioned, are really hesitant about supporting any kind of in-person opportunity right now. So we will be definitely focusing on collection again as the primary way we can get food to the food banks. Nonprofits historically are always asked to do more with less, and the pandemic is going to put an even bigger strain on them, I think, even through this year and probably into next year. About 9% of families in Mercer County were food insecure before the pandemic. Now it's 14%, so it's really almost doubled. And some of our local nonprofit partners have said they've seen their demand increase almost fourfold. So it's just going to continue at a level. I think when businesses are fully operational, there'll be some families that the situation really won't have improved. So we're going to have to work really hard, as well as making sure that people know what is available to them. That is one thing we are finding. A lot of families who are available for SNAP qualified, they aren't getting the SNAP program for their families, and this is important. So we're going to make sure that we are doing a lot of outreach this year to make sure everybody does know that. And really quickly, one of the things that I do want to focus on for us was our heroes, because they were amazing. We were very fortunate to have a Strikeout Hunger Committee that's working with us for the past several years. And our success is definitely due to their dedication and their enthusiasm. They would be there to help with food collection, food distribution, fundraising, packing meals. They're a really very special group. And I just want to take a minute. I'd be really remiss if I did not recognize them. So really quickly, it's Jeff Richardson from NJM Insurance, Vicki Bickle from Mercer Street Friends, Joe Lemkin from Stark and Stark, Beth Englos from Jewish Family Children's Services, Jessica Talander from Princeton University, Claire Casabon from Grounds for Sculpture, Hillary Spivak from Arbonne, Carol Bursack from Investors Bank, Kathy Snyder from Rolling Harvest, Sal Levitano from the Princeton Rotary and SL Business Solutions, Kelly Williams from TCNJ, Peggy Shader Gother from Investors Bank, Judy Lansing from M&T Bank, Yolanda Sweeney from PNC Bank, Jennifer Vampel, Wells Fargo, Roberta Ferreira from EMS, Teresa Hollander from Northfield, and James Allen from Mercer Street Friends. So as you can see, it's a very diverse group. We do have a lot of bank ladies. I love my bank ladies. And a lot of our local corporations who have really stepped up to help us because they see the need of the community, that food insecurity is 24/7. 365 will continue after, unfortunately, this pandemic is done. But hopefully the light has been shed on this problem, and we will do more to make sure that we can resolve it, especially with our great partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And Joan, are there any heroes or hero groups that you would like to recognize as we wind down here? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Rowena. Really, first and foremost, I really thank those that we serve. They are the true heroes here, the people who are living this pandemic in ways that we can't imagine. I went to my refrigerator, every day during the pandemic, and I knew there was food there. But these people who were in need of food, the grace, the patience, the resiliency, and the gratitude that they expressed for receiving the simplest of foods. It's, again, remarkable and inspiring, the human spirit. And next, the volunteers themselves, what the VOAD is built on. These volunteers who showed up, even when it didn't feel safe to do so, they're, just from their human spirit, to serve others, to put themselves in jeopardy. We were all holing in our homes, and they were out there, stepping up right on the front line. So, they're, each and every one is a hero. And lastly, I've been so inspired also by the incredibly caring and passionate partners and food distributors, faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and especially those who work behind the scenes. No glory, all done in, pure humility for the dignity and well-being of others. I'll never forget the experiences of this pandemic and the goodness that has come out of it amidst the crisis and the horror and all the difficulty. There's so much to be said that there's so much goodness, and we need to focus on that. So thank you for that, Rowena.
Zenon, the next 12 months ahead for you, of course, it's Greek bicentennial. So we're very happy about that. And any other challenges for the next 12 months, or any heroes that you want to mention?
Sure. Thanks, Ro. Clearly, the next 12 months are going to be a challenge and beyond. The economy is going to take a long time to stabilize itself. We've had $6 trillion of stimulus cash that's been keeping us afloat. And small businesses, restaurants, local places in downtowns are going to find it very hard to keep their doors open. That doesn't just detract from the downtown's beauty, but look at what's going to happen to the unemployment rate. What's going to happen to people's lives are going to get disrupted, and the insecurity in terms of food and so many other things that keep us all moving forward are going to be in serious jeopardy. So I think that we need to redouble our efforts in anticipation of the economic decline, which is probably going to happen in terms of employment and clearly different shifts in employment patterns. So we're going to have a long road to ride to get to a stable ground. It's going to be tough for everyone, and I think that the efforts that we're doing in NJVOAD and so many other organizations across the state and country are going to be essential to keeping us as cohesive and stable as possible. So it's not over. The economy is going to take a long time to get back. People to get back to their lives and to get an economic security that they're going to need is going to be a long time coming. So everyone deserves a huge applause and encouragement to keep doing what we've been doing and what you've been doing. In terms of heroes, that sometimes is a tricky word. And I think it's too limiting in some ways. My father always told me that a hero requires one act of greatness, but a good person requires a lifetime. And so I think goodness is actually more important and a better accolade than heroism. And among the finest people that I've had the pleasure of meeting who has shown a lifetime of contributions is our very own Rowena Madden, who has been an example, not just as a hero, but as a truly fine person and great role model. So Rowena, I want to thank you for all you've done and the encouragement you've given so many people and the way you've been able to help them find comfort in very difficult times. So I thank you as a friend and as a colleague, and all of you are good people meant to be the highest praise and accolade I can give anyone.
Thank you, Zenon, and thank you, everyone. I think this was a very eye-opening panel. I think we've learned a lot about each other and the missions of our various groups, and let's keep working together. And thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.